What is up to all my Ursula K. Guin fans out there? My name is Ian, and today we are going to cover one of the most prolific authors of all time, and a legendary author, a female pioneer in fantasy and science fiction, an author who can change your life, who knows how to use symbolism, who doesn't navel gaze in her novels, but bursts out. That's who we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about Ursula K. Le Guin's influences, some of her thoughts on writing fiction, and things in her life that helped create a legendary and consistent career because she wrote her butt off. So let's start off with some of her spiritual influences, everybody. And the first one is Taoism. Taoism gave me a handle on how to look at life and how to lead it when I was an adolescent hunting for ways to make sense of the world without going off into the God business. Returning to Lao Tzu throughout the years, I've always found and find him offering what I want or need to learn. My translation version, whatever it is, of the Tao Te Ching is a byproduct of that long and happy association. I would actually love to read that. I've read a lot of her works. I didn't know she had a Tao Te Ching translation. But Taoism is very chill. Is it very relaxed? If you've never read the Tao Te Ching, go check that out. But a lot of it, stems from the work of Chuang Tzu and Lao Tzu, and it's just about relaxing, creating a co-creative experience with the world by not doing anything, by just observing the world through consciousness. And it's a great alternative, especially once again for young people, as it was for me, of Christianity or Judaism or Islam, or atheism, because those are so limiting, those are so silly in 2022. Another influence that she has is Buddhism. And, quote, my knowledge of Buddhism is much scantier and more recent, but it becomes indispensable in showing me how to use meditation usefully and giving me a steady north to my moral compass. That's what meditation and these things are about. They're not about achieving enlightenment or faith. There's all that. Go check out my yoga channel, Yogadelics, if you want to hear me go off on about Eastern philosophy. But at the base level, if we look at the teachings of the legendary yogi Krishnamacharya, it's just about enhancing your life. Unless you are the person who's going to dedicate their entire life to studying, yoga or meditation and, detaching from life, like in a monastic way, we should just be using these things to improve our life. And Ursula K. Le Guin has that connection. She has that clarity that Eastern philosophy can give the Western mind, and I really applaud her for that. So let's talk about another thing that Ursula K. Let's talk about her literary influences now. So something that writers do all the time is that they look around the world horizontally. They look at what other people are publishing, what their friends or colleagues or people they know are doing. They get resentful because other people who suck are getting a ton of money. I just made a video on Ocean Vuong's book and how bad it is. But we have to look vertically. That means we have to look to the future or to the past. We have to learn to praise because, quote, this is who Ursula K. Le Guin is influenced by. Writers I'd like to be as good as, although not like. And so when we hear our influences in a second, which are Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and Virginia Woolf, which are very classical authors, you'd think that someone like Le Guin would be influenced by more progressive authors. James Joyce, I'm sure she is influenced by Joyce, but those are the people she'd name. Dickens, Austen, Woolf have a sense of style, and that is a critique of the science fiction community, right? Especially back then, because in the 30s and the 40s, science fiction was about ideas. It was about the book was a vessel for a big idea, and the style and even the content didn't really matter. It was just trying to put out these mind-blowing ideas. And if you look at Disney and all these other things, that's what our whole society was built on post-World War II. It was, especially in the West, it was about whoever can dream the biggest is going to gain the most power. And that's such a crazy thread of history, and I'll talk about that another time. But Le Guin and her era of science fiction and fantasy finally brought in more style. They really started to stylize it. And one way to transcend your genre and to really burst is to find people just totally opposite from what you were writing and steal from them, because a lot of people who are writing in science fiction, for instance, have stolen from Frank Herbert or have, ripped off Dan Simmons or somebody, or Ursula K. Le Guin. But how many science fiction writers today are ripping off mystery novels or Marcel Proust or something? I mean, I'm sure some are, but when you dive into other areas, it creates contrast, because as we're going to be talking about in a bit, the form or genre that you are writing in actually influences your archetypes and where the story goes. Genre, for instance, when you write poetry, when you sit down to write a poem, it does something to you. You write in a certain way, but we'll cover that in a second. So Let's talk about Ursula K. Le Guin and Virginia Woolf. She was very much influenced by Virginia Woolf's style, but later on, when second wave feminism came around, Ursula K. Le Guin really started reading more into feminism. And if you think about it, the left hand of darkness, the left hand path of darkness. Sorry, I'm under the lights right now. Sometimes I mess these book names up. It's a genderless society. And at some level, with second wave feminism, that might seem a little bit regressive, but where we're at now, that actually is at some level progressive thinking by her. And she said she didn't even look into gender studies, but when feminism came around, she hopped on the opportunity because at some level she was oppressed, because female science fiction authors for decades had been having to write under male pen names or with male initials to be able to get published in the industry. And it was very corrupt and very sad. Same thing still happens today at some level. Because, as you know, the fantasy and science fiction world have so many gate trolls. But then she went back and started to read A Room of One's Own and more Virginia Woolf and realized the impact, and really stepped into her role. And, as she says, write like a woman, started to not have to write like a man or think like a man or try to get published like a man or worry about book sales, but to really think and act like she felt what a woman means. And man, what a great era looking back of the pioneers, the people, and Ursula K. Le Guin's one of them, so I applaud her for that. So another thing I think she does really well is that Le Guin is not afraid, because today in cancel culture, people don't want to do anything too crazy, right? Especially if you are writing anything from the perspective of the right? If you are writing from the perspective of the right, you will get canceled. And if you're writing things from a super leftist point of view, the right will cancel you. I am apolitical. But Le Guin actually studied anarchist writers. And probably what she was studying, for what I have surmised, was that they were leftist anarchists, which most of the time they are. And, quote, it was a very demanding book to write because I had to pretty much invent that society pretty much from scratch, with a lot of help from the anarchist writers, particularly Americans like Paul Goodman, who had actually tried to envision what an anarchist society might be like. And Le Guin is such an innovator because at that time when she wrote this text, that's slipping my mind right now, she went against the grain because she created an anarchist society. Most dystopian or utopian novels that we know, even now, are based in a more socialist or controlled world, a technocratic or authoritarian world, but in an anarchist dystopian or utopian novel. So, all these things, and when you wade into unfamiliar territory like this, you're going to make people mad. You're going to promote things maybe, or make it seem like you're promoting things as an author, and you can't be scared to do that. And so many, once again, authors are scared or self-edit or self-censor as they are writing, or publishing houses. So another thing Le Guin talks about is when you're writing, that you just need to be thinking what you want as a reader. Quote, as a reader, because nobody here was doing anything like that, except in genre. One science fiction writer who's still only known in science fiction, as far as I know, is Cordwainer Smith. He had a very big influence on me. He was a conscious literary writer with a nice prose style and a strange imagination. I think he worked for the State Department. Cordwainer Smith is a nom de plume. And Smith is really good. I would go check out some of his short stories. I think he only has one novel out there. And he had some weird connections with the CIA and his foreign agent. And it's really wild. But that's one of the benefits of genre, though, that you can actually explore ideas and maybe get away with it. If you write a very realistic book that has, these ideas, you may end up attacking a certain group of people and they will get mad. But if you just turn them into some aliens or make it a fantasy novel and make them metaphorical, yeah, some people will get mad, especially if you get big, and people will maybe make those connections. But you can always just deny it. You can just be like, I make everything up in my head. I don't watch the news at all. What? I don't know if I would advise saying that, though, but you guys get what I'm saying. So let's talk about what we were talking about writing in form. And when you write in genre or in poetry, that the form actually influences what is writing. Quote, what is being written. Quote, somewhat the same. It's like working in any form. In poetry, for example, when you work in form, be it a sonnet or VNL or whatever, the form is there and you have to fill it. And you have to find how to make that form say what you want to say. And this is such a big concept in the East, too. When you look at certain yoga poses or dance sequence, when you do the same thing all the time and you write or you work within a system or a set sequence, you become more relaxed. It actually changes how you were experiencing things. It becomes the third mind, right? It's you, the sequence, and then you and the sequence together. But when you're free-flowing, you don't have that third mind or body or idea. Hopefully I'm making sense here. But so when you're writing in a genre, certain things happen. That's why a lot of fantasy and science fiction novels, even though they're stealing a lot of things still kind of happen the same. They enter into the same funnel. They're in the same universe, even if it's space operas or just straight alien books. And certain things happen, especially in larger novels. And it's not because they are stealing some of the time. It's because genre almost lives outside of us. It's really crazy, but and it impacts us. The form impacts us, and I think that's so cool. And that's something that we've lost, actually. I talk about this on the channel all the time, that we used to mimic very early on, before Christianity came and, like, you know, civilization at some level. In writing, we'd imitate nature, and our forms would be based on nature, which is so cool. Instead of the sonnet, like, you know, A, B, you know, all of that, we would actually be imitating nature. And certain societies and peoples would understand how to imitate nature. So another thing that Le Guin talks about is that about fiction, and a lot of people don't take fiction seriously because it's not real. And fiction has more opportunities for us to grow and transform as human beings than nonfiction does. You know, other things do, because we have that freedom as readers to, you know, or the writers of fiction have that freedom to take us wherever they want to go. And quote, "They say I don't read fiction because it isn't real. This is incredibly naive. Fiction is something that only human beings do, and only in certain circumstances. We don't know exactly for what purposes, but one of the things it does is lead you to recognize what you did not know before." And it does. For instance, I'm going to be making a video soon about Brokeback Mountain, and so many people, when that came out in 2007, had not been, you know, a lot of the country, gay marriage was still illegal, and a lot of people had never been exposed, especially on the big screen, to get, you know, gay men, especially gay masculine men who were cowboys having sex and dealing with homophobia and these things. And when you start pushing outside of the limit in terms of, you know, art, you have this freedom, because when you never heard those stories of those gay guys, they didn't get to write memoirs or get published. Maybe we get them coming down in diaries, but with fiction, we can make it much more interesting. And I know that sounds bad, but we can fictionalize it and create an audience, you know, and it can win Academy Awards and be seen, you know, tens of millions of times. And with Le Guin's work, that has happened too. It can transcend what it is. Unlike a nonfiction book, you know, if you read Atomic Habits by James Clear or whoever wrote that has helped millions of people, but it's a blank canvas. It's just a medium. And fiction, though, really is a message. And what I mean by it's a medium, because a lot of people use, for instance, habit building or personal development or productivity stuff to actually detach more from reality in themselves, and so they can work more and be better and make more money and chase all these dumb goals that they don't need to do, that are just fueling this weird society of excess that we are in. But fiction, though, can do so much more than that. If you read an Ursula K. Le Guin, one of her better novels, man, like I said, it creates transformation in you. It makes you see the world deeper. It makes you feel weird, and that's what we are looking for. And it helps you see. It helps you see different realities. And quote, "This is what a lot of mystical disciplines are after: simply seeing, really being aware, which means you are recognizing the things around you more deeply. But they also seem new. So seeing as new and recognition are really the same thing." And that's what fiction can do. It can make us see anew. It can help us see new worlds and ideas. And you know, it's this idea that when you hit these mystical states, that you can see the world as it is, an objective reality. As Rilke said, all angels are terrifying. That when you collapse the layer between, you know, our subjective perspective, and you can see reality in a very objective way, it's terrifying. It's insane. We can't even handle it. We might die. If we could see reality for what it was and have no filter, we might just be overloaded and die, because that's all we're doing. We're self-hypnotizing. Every single time you drive on the highway or go somewhere, everyone's eyes are glazed over. Every time you're watching me right now and you're getting hypnotized. Don't do it. Wake up. This is reality. And this is the end of the video. So go watch this other book review, though, on Ursula K. Le Guin's book, A Wizard of Ursay. I think it's really good. Peace.